What's up, everybody, and welcome to another Boardroom Out of Office podcast. Today we have a very special guest, someone I have yet to be able to meet in person, but have wanted to and really admire. So I am excited to bring on today's show the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, Miss Jeanie Buss. Jeanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. And if no one can see the video, and we will use some video clips from this, you are sitting in front of how many championship trophies?
Well, technically there's 11 here, but I couldn't get them all in the shot. So I guess that's what we call a humble brag. They're just a beautiful backdrop. And,
Yes.
they're really the inspiration for how we designed our training center, because the trophies, while they're here in my office, they're also from the court. You can always see them. You can visualize. This was something that was important to Phil Jackson, that the players always be reminded what the journey is about and what the goal is. And so the trophies overlook the practice court.
Very few teams could tell their designer that the theme is to keep the championship trophies in view at all times. So you grew up in LA, right?
Born and raised in LA, so that's kind of unusual for LA. We're a very transient city, so we bring in all crossroads of people. But I was born and raised, went to school here.
And your family was in real estate growing up?
Yes, the family business was real estate development, so apartment buildings, commercial development, hotels. That is where my father, Dr. Jeanie Buss, made his fortune, was in real estate, and using his mathematical mind in knowing how to finance and create wealth that way. But certainly Southern California real estate in the 60s and 70s kind of made it easy to grow his wealth quickly.
Was your dad, even when he was in real estate, was he always this kind of like bigger than life character? Did he always have those cool ass glasses on?
Yes, yes, very similar to those. He had definitely had his own style, and what was important to him was, because he received his PhD from USC at the age of 23 in physical chemistry, chemical engineering, and he went straight to work for an aerospace company that had a dress code. And he quickly realized that dress codes were not for him. And so, he really kind of doubled down on the whole casual blue jeans. I'm going to dress the way I want to dress, not for what people want me to do. And, that's the kind of thinker he was.
And ahead of his time, because people like me now only have sweatpants in our closet.
He would love today's casual lifestyle. He would really dig it.
So you're a very successful businesswoman, and I know that people that come from successful parents sometimes get a bad reputation because people think that it's a cakewalk, but it's quite the contrary. And at times there's harder obstacles, and a door can open, but that doesn't mean anything unless you know how to enter and you know what to do when you get in there. So I would imagine you had dreams as a kid before, when your parents were in real estate. What was young Jeanie Buss like? What was that fantasy as a child?
For me, it was always to work in the family business. I was fascinated with what my dad did. I was the kind of kid that would sneak into his meetings, maybe, hey, Jeanie, go grab me a Coke from the refrigerator. And I'd do that. And I would sit and stay in the meeting. Just everything was interesting to me, what he did, and kind of his vision. And he had aspirations of being a teacher someday. And when he was growing up, so he had the ability to explain things and break things down really well. So even at a young age, he would say, oh, you're curious about this? Let me explain it to you. And at whatever level he needed to make it interesting to me. So, he was grooming me to be part of the business, when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old.
That's cool. It's funny you say that because people think that like super successful people are long-winded and they love to give a lot of context because they understand exactly what they have to tell you for you to get it. And that means that they have to give you all the color around it. And then you usually get great storytellers out of that. So I imagine your dad was probably an amazing storyteller.
Amazing storyteller, very, very well said. And, when I look back at, the things that he told me, at the time, they might not have made any sense to me, but because of the way he told the story, they stuck with me. And then all of a sudden the light would go off and go, well, that's why he made this point to me.
Yeah.
So he was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful mentor. And, when I was a senior in high school was when he bought not only the Los Angeles Lakers, but the NHL Kings hockey team and the arena that they played in. So all of a sudden, he took his wealth and pivoted from real estate into sports and entertainment. So then that became the focus of the family business.
So dad says, Jeanie, get the kids, get your siblings. I have to talk to you about something. Come down to the table. And you're 17. You think you're going into real estate. You're in Southern California. And dad says, I sold it all. We're in this new family business now. And what is the whole family's reaction? Were you guys sports fans? Were you Laker fans?
You know what? You're so funny because you're so spot on in this conversation. It basically was, he called the kids together and he said, could you imagine if you could go see the Rolling Stones and you could sit in the front row to whatever show came to the Forum? How would you like that? It was like, yes. He goes, actually, you could even stand on the stage if you want to. Well, yes, that would be so much fun. Well, guess what? Basically, I bought the Forum, I bought the basketball team, I bought a hockey team. And, when you're a kid, it's like all you can think about is like going to see Rod Stewart or Elton John at the Forum. And, certainly I played basketball in high school and I was actually the scorekeeper for the boys basketball team. So I love basketball too.
That must have been just like next level excitement in the family. I think nowadays it's the opposite. The kids are telling their father from the time they realize that they have money to go buy an NBA team. It's the total opposite. But back then, that was probably pretty shocking and something, though, that needed a vision, right? In order to buy something in Los Angeles, California that had had success and had had star players, you probably had to have a vision for what you were doing. And I imagine that the entertainment side of things, which was one of his calling cards, was a big part of it, right? What was kind of like, what do you remember was the state of the Lakers at 17 years old? That was 1979, right? What was the state of the Lakers at that point and the state of the NBA in general?
The Lakers had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and, were competitive, but not obviously winning championships. So now imagine, in May of 79, my dad buys the team that owns the #1 draft pick. So in June, and he clearly knew who he wanted to draft. A lot of the people that worked for him were suggesting that Sidney Moncrief would be a better draft pick. At that time, it was unheard of for an underage classman, a 19-year-old, to declare for the draft. What happened was back then they used to have what was called a hardship rule. So you had to apply, that there was a hardship involved, and then you could turn pro. So, basketball people weren't used to drafting 19-year-olds. They liked the safer bet of a 22-year-old that you knew, that they were going to grow into their body or that they were going to be mature players. But my dad, when he saw Magic Johnson play in the NCAA finals that year, he knew Magic was the player that was going to lead the team the way he wanted to, a flashy player that played with passion and joy. And, you know, for him, what was really important was that he felt he loved the city of Los Angeles. He wasn't born in LA. He was born in Wyoming, grew up in Wyoming. But as soon as he could get out, he wanted to move to LA. And LA embraced him. And he obviously made a lot of money. And he wanted to do something for LA. And he felt that there was a bias towards LA teams in the national media, that nobody really cared about what happened, you know, 3 time zones over, that everything was about the Knicks or the 76ers or of course the Boston Celtics. So he wanted the team to rival those East Coast teams. And, you know, he had a vision of what he wanted to bring, you know, to make the Lakers exciting, dynamic, and, you know, they're, as they went on to be called the Showtime Lakers, because literally what my dad wanted it to be was, you know, when the show started, it was showtime and we were going to knock your socks off. That's really what he wanted.
You know, Sidney Moncrief owes her dad because he had a really nice career, but had he been drafted ahead of Magic Johnson, he would forever be the guy drafted ahead of Magic Johnson.
That's a really good point. Thank you. It's true. I mean, but you know, there was no talking my dad out of Magic. That was for sure. And of course, you know, my dad had never met Magic, and you know how he could have such good intuition. That's another thing that made him such a great businessman. He had an intuition about people. It made him a great poker player too, because he could read the table. But certainly, you know, Magic, once he met Magic, it was like these were soulmates. These were 2 people that just came together and, you know, complemented each other in terms of, you know, who they were. And for my dad being the teacher, here was a student that wanted to learn about the game and learn about business. And, you know, my dad was a willing teacher. So it was really a special relationship.
I had never met Magic before. And I had dinner, and Kevin Durant had never really spent that much time with Magic. And he called me maybe 2 weeks before we had dinner with him and said, I want to spend time with Magic. Can the 2 of us have dinner and just hang with him? And we went and had early dinner with him, which was great. He wanted an early dinner, which I didn't want to admit I did too, but nothing better than someone wanting to meet you at 6:30. So we met him, and beyond the fact that, like, and this is probably old news to you, but to a New Yorker like me that never had a chance to meet him, he really is pretty magical in person. Like, however the nickname came about, there's so much truth to it because it's an odd thing that exudes out of him that, you know, I really wanted to learn and take in as much as I could during that meal, because I could run into him 100 times more, but I didn't have 2 dedicated hours to talk to him. And I was born in the late 70s, and I grew up 80s and 90s basketball, so I instantly went to that period. And he talked about your father as if he had just met him the night before with that kind of excitement, and talked about, you know, the dynamic the 2 of them had, the things that he taught him and exposed him to. And then they ranged from anything from like a one-liner about something so simple, like an everyday chore and how you should go about it, to an overarching like philosophy on people. But you and him were the same age when he was drafted. So was there a relationship the 2 of you kind of also formed right off the bat, or a certain connection you guys had?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and thank you for sharing that story. I love hearing things like that. And, you know, Magic, I think the word charisma is what, there's something about him. He's like a Pied Piper. People just want to be around him. But yes, you know, I was 17 and Magic was 19. And I'll never forget the first day I met him. You know, I was living with my dad in his house on Beverly Glen in Bel Air. And back then, the draft was literally, you're sitting at home and they call you and they say, hey, you were drafted number 1. get on an airplane to, wherever you were going. So, he got on a plane, flew out to Los Angeles, and Bill Sharman, our general manager, brought him over. And when the doorbell rang, my dad said, you know what, like, I'm not ready yet. I got to do a couple things upstairs. Will you bring them in the house, offer them something to drink, and I'll be down in a few minutes. So, make conversation. So I opened the door, and it was this smile that it was like blinding, and like there was like sparks coming off his teeth. Like, as soon as you met him, you're just floored by who he is. So I bring them in, we're having small talk, and he goes, I'm really excited that I was drafted by the Lakers, but I'm only going to stay here for 3 years because I want to go back home and play for my hometown team in Detroit. And I went, excuse me? And I said, I need to go. I'll be right back. So I ran upstairs, and I'm like, Dad, I can't believe what he said. He said he's only going to stay for 3 years. He wants to go back home and play in Detroit. And my dad's like, Jeanie, calm down. He goes, as soon as he puts on a Laker uniform and walks out on that crowd and sees that crowd and hears the cheers for him, he goes, he's never going to leave.
Never.
And he's never left. He was exactly
never.
That. My dad, he knew that he would fall in love with LA just as he had fallen in love with LA. So,
yep.
They had such a special relationship, and that led to a lot of success. The fact that my dad was a rookie owner and he was a rookie, and we won a championship that first year is really, truly remarkable.
Do you think Magic coming out in the draft kind of pushed your father's decision to buy the team knowing that he was coming, or did he not see it that kind of far ahead?
He didn't see it that far ahead. What actually happened was my dad, kind of sticking his toes in the water for sports, bought a team in what was called World Team Tennis, which was, Billie Jean King, Larry King started this league, and my dad owned the LA Strings, and they were playing at the Forum. And my dad would go to Laker games, and he noticed that Jack Kent Cooke, the owner of the team then, was not attending any games. Well, it turns out what happened was Jack Kent Cooke moved to Nevada because he was going through a big, expensive divorce. And he wanted to establish residency in Nevada so he wouldn't have to pay his ex-wife a large sum of money, because the state by state, the divorce laws are different. So my got an opportunity and started flying to Vegas on a regular basis to negotiate to get him to sell the teams. And, my dad, he worked, several years to get to that point so that, he convinced him to sell. And Cook at that time owned the Washington NFL team. So, he had a team in another league. So, the timing was right.
Yeah.
But my dad noticed that the Lakers were drawing 7,000 or 8,000 people, and that, it was because no one was really paying attention and putting that effort into, getting a winning team.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that they had KAREEM and we're only having 7,000 or 8,000 people there. So the Showtime era, which I find fascinating. I mean, I am a Pat Riley fan. I hold those time with the Knicks like very sacred, even though most Knicks fans feel differently. But it's like, I feel like if the Lakers had not gone on to have 3 more iterations of championship teams, there'd be even more emphasis on just how dominant 80 to 91 was when you talk about the Bulls, the Warriors, because that Laker team to me obviously is as good as any. Do you think Pat Riley's kind of place in Laker history, because of the Knicks, the Heat, and what's continued on, has in some ways got lost in just how incredible it was?
Yeah, but I still think when people hear Pat Riley, they associate him more with the Lakers, even though he was with the Lakers 10 years. And I think he's been with Miami like 20 years.
25, yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's funny that but certainly his place in Laker history is well earned, even though he wasn't the coach that for that first championship. Yep. He's very beloved by Laker fans, and I'm happy for his success in Miami. I mean, he really knows how not only to coach a team, but to create an environment where players can succeed.
So you probably won't answer this, but do you think that some of those Magic, Kareem, Worthy, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper teams, do you think those could be the best Laker teams ever?
I can't answer that. That's like, I know. I mean, I get suckered into that. I listed my top 5 Lakers or most important Lakers.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I got in trouble for that. And I looked at that question as most important to me, like in terms of my career. But there's
you can't. You're right.
Answer, so I'm not.
Don't answer that.
But definitely, that era, they captured exactly what, my dad wanted Laker basketball to be. So, those were.
Yeah. That's like, they're almost like what was in the business plan, as if your dad was rolling out this new enterprise that will forever be like the model of what the business plan is. And now it's evolved into different coaches, different stars, but that was, the stars were aligned. Growing up, that Hollywood meant the Lakers and vice versa. Magic was this miracle. And Kareem, I remember Kareem was on Different Strokes, man. Kareem was an actor. He was on Airplane. Yeah. Airplane. I mean, obviously. But that must have been just a wild time, right? Because you're with the organization now. You might not have been working directly with the Lakers, if I remember, but you were working in the family business. And was Kareem understanding? It seemed when I was talking to Magic, I keep referencing this cool ass dinner I had, but it seemed like Magic and Kareem had this incredible complementary personality and respected it and respected the boundaries. And that obviously we know now is a challenge within a business, a challenge within an organization. Was that a special camaraderie and a time where James, Kareem, Magic, could you see just everyone understanding and identifying the roles? Because Kareem is the greatest scorer ever, but those were Magic's teams.
From day one, Magic, acknowledged that Kareem was the captain, and that was his name. He called him captain. That was, he deferred to him. It was his team. And, what an athlete Kareem was, playing till the age of 42. And, his intellect for the game. But I think, his personality type was so different than Magic. And that very first preseason game when we were in San Diego playing the Clippers, and we won a game, on a last minute shot, and Magic ran over to Kareem and hugged him like it was, the NCAA championship. And Kareem just looked at him like, are you kidding me? There's, 82 games every year. Like, this is not how we do it. Like, settle down, rookie.
Settle down, Rook.
They're just, Magic wears his heart on his sleeve, and Kareem is very stoic and quiet, but what a wonderful human being he is.
I feel like Magic's like the ultimate G. He was like, let me call him the captain. I'm just going to call him the captain. I'm going to say it's his team, but watch this. I'm Magic. He's good. Exactly. Well played, Magic. When Magic was diagnosed with HIV. And so this was 91. Yeah. And for me, I remember it like the Challenger or Princess Diana or in some ways like those kind of moments. I remember being with my high school basketball team. I was a freshman on the varsity, Gianni. And I was with the guys, and people were crying. And Pat Riley had moved to the Knicks, and there was like a press conference the Knicks were holding, I remember, it seemed like the absolute end of the world. It must, my memory of it must pale in comparison to what your memory of it was. But did it feel that way? I mean, this was something we had never even thought about, and then all of a sudden, this was the most famous person in sports.
I saw my dad cry twice in my life. The first time was when my grandmother passed away, and the day of the press conference when Magic announced his retirement. And it's, when you're a kid, seeing your dad cry, the strongest person in the world you can imagine, is so upsetting. And, at that time, HIV was, literally a death sentence. And we didn't know how long Magic, what was going to happen next. And, he made the right decision to retire and focus on his health. And, but, we were all a mess. We were all crying. The strongest person in that room was Magic. He stood up there and said, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to change things. I'm going to, he was fearless. And to think about, like we're falling apart, and the one that we're crying about is the one comforting us, was, really, truly a remarkable thing. And, I'm so grateful that he's here and thriving and healthy. And, but he really did put a face on HIV and really, changed the outcome of how it would be studied, and resources that went towards finding medication and prevention. And what a leader, what a remarkable human.
It's amazing to think if someone was able to do that, that would be their life's accomplishment. And it's one of a multitude of things he's done. It's interesting because it wasn't an injury, and because it was this, a life-threatening disease. What people don't talk about is maybe what Magic and the Lakers were still going to do as part of that era had he not got sick, because you guys had just lost to the Bulls. And Michael was going to keep going, but you guys would have retooled. Right. And there would have been, KAREEM would have left, he was gone. You would have retooled.
We had Vlade Divac as our new center. And just like you said, we had, Michael Jordan's first championship was Magic's last finals, right? So it was going to be like we would retool over the summer, and then we'd go back and get our championship back. And that, you would have those, that was going to be a rivalry, Michael and Magic, right? But then Magic suddenly retires, and the organization was not prepared for that, because you're used to, like, planning, the retirement of a star. I'll never forget that in 1985 or 86, when KAREEM retired, my dad the next season got a new scoreboard. We had never had a video board before. So they were just, that was the hot new thing, where the arenas with like a video scoreboard to show replays. And, my dad said, I waited an extra year to get the new video board, because I knew when KAREEM left that we would need a new attraction. And, a new scoreboard would be a new attraction to get people to come to games. So, like he thought about things like that. Well, none of us saw Magic's retirement. I mean, he was only 31 or 32.
Yeah.
He had plenty of basketball to go. And, it was devastating. And, we had kind of, our process, our, philosophy about retiring jerseys is that we retire a number when a player goes into the Hall of Fame. Well, you can't go into the Hall of Fame until you've been retired for at least years, right? Or now it's 4. But, we, broke our own rule and quickly retired his jersey because we wanted to make sure he would still be there to see that happen. I mean,
Oh
that
my God, that's crazy.
like thought process that we were going through. And, so it was difficult, but, those early 90s teams, we only missed the playoffs once, which is really a testament to the franchise. And, but, the plan was going into 1996, going after a big free agent, and it turned out to be Shaquille O'Neal. And that the next phase of the organization.
So that kind of dry spell, and like you said, you guys only missed one playoffs, but the bar is so high, and you're coming off of championship after championship. But the dry spell, I don't recall. Was it tough on your dad not making championships? Was that kind of era of 91 to 96 for an organization like yours challenging?
Yeah, he hated losing. My dad, it was an emotional wreck after losing in the playoffs. But, really, what he taught me is that, it's really hard to win a championship. I mean, things really have to line up, but you have to be competitive. So like a good year would be losing in the second round. A great year is winning a championship. So somewhere between those two things is what your goal is, and that you always have to be part of the conversation. You have to be competitive, and that's what the brand that he built with the Lakers was: consistent winning, consistent, always being able to hold your own. And then if everything else, no injuries, things go right, then do you get to that peak of winning a championship. But he said, Jeanie, the team always has to be competitive.
And I think part of that is transcendent star power. I mean, it's important in New York to have New York type stars. And I can tell you from being in New York, there's a different expectation of what that person is. In LA, it's Hollywood. It's bigger than life. And Shaq, I think even when he was drafted by Orlando, was just like baking in Disney World, getting ready to go to LA. And everybody that knew basketball knew that that's the trajectory that he should and would be on. When you first kind of spent time with Shaq, was there any similarity to what Magic kind of brought to the organization in terms of just like the clouds now open up a bit?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we were back on the map. We were, landing a free agent like Shaquille O'Neal, just, okay, now we fun again. And, but I would say very different in their approach to the game. Shaq is, just, the eighth wonder of the world. And now I had, started becoming more involved in the basketball side of things. I had run minor league teams. My dad gave me a roller hockey team, an indoor soccer team, anything that you could put at an arena, he made me, that was my job. And he actually sent me in the mid 80s to Russia to negotiate with the cultural ministry to try to bring back the Moscow circus to go on tour.
Oh my God.
I paid my dues, in other words. And then, I also spent 5 years running the arena, which gave me so much experience that is important for my job today in terms of knowing how to run an arena and the pitfalls that there might be. But anyway, having Shaq, I was put in charge of the preseason, not scheduling the opponents, but deciding where we would play. And when you have a player like Shaq, what we did was it was basically SHAQ across America. People were so fascinated at his size and his ability and his athleticism, with having like size 23 shoes. How did he get up and down the court? How did he, you just had to see it for yourself in person. So we played in, Memphis before they had a team. We played in New Orleans before they had a team. We were the very first event in the Oklahoma City arena. That was the kind of power that SHAQ had. He made the Lakers, a national, international brand. He was just a force to be reckoned with, and he was a lot of fun too.
Yes. I read that you went to your first Board of Governors meeting in 1995, right? So obviously I feel like it was incredibly thoughtful and strategic of your father to encourage you to see every side of the business, right? Which is a testament to what I said earlier, just about how, seasoned you are at this and how much you know about the business. And it's like any great restaurant owner who will tell you they washed dishes and folded napkins and worked as a hostess as well as worked in the kitchen. When you walked into that Board of Governors meeting, and this is 1995, did you feel like, oh my God, I'm not like, how am I moving in this room full of vultures?
I swear to God, I thought going to the Board of Governors meetings, it would be just a bunch of people sitting around having cigars, like patting on the back, like this is the greatest business ever. But you're right, it was a room full of sharks. And, I had, something that happened, there was in the room of like 80 people, there was maybe one other woman. And I had something happen to me at that first meeting that made me so self-conscious and so like I felt like I didn't belong, and I really questioned, would I be able to, find success or, accomplish what my dad's vision was for me. And, it was completely different than what I thought. And, but I knew as time went on that the older people, the more established ownership would probably think of me as a secretary, or, why don't you go get us some coffee, or, pat me on the head, whatever. But as time went on, I realized there would be new owners coming in. And the more established I became, then I could kind of help new people in the room. And, that's how I could make my mark. That's how I could find my way. And now I can say to you that, as I've watched the ownership evolve in this league, we have, some of the brightest, forward-thinking, progressive people. And I think that's what makes the NBA the best league in all of professional sports.
The other owners must have just been so jealous of your dad for so long. And we don't have to name names. And even that, you don't have to answer that one. But I know they were. I can just imagine. And then here came you, who had the experience, knew what you were talking about, had the right attitude. You're very composed. And then the jealousy probably was just like driven in now like frustration. And how do they get everything? These are the Lakers. But the truth was, like I said earlier, like running an operation like that comes with its own dynamics and pitfalls. And I wonder if the Shaq-Kobe relationship was trying for you guys as a family, putting aside the business, just something that it seemed like your father from afar had this ability, which all great entrepreneurs do, to say, you know what, let me fix this. Like, no way. I can have a conversation with these two men. There's no way we can't fix this. But it wasn't able to be fixed. I mean, you guys won at the highest level. Again, like a little bit of a misnomer about the Shaq-Kobe era is they still won 3 and should have won 4. But you don't want disharmony within an organization that great. So was that something that kept you guys up at night as a family?
Well, yes. I mean, like, okay, so now 96, not only do we get Shaq, but Jerry West, like, maneuvers, we had to trade Vlade Divac, which was, to create the cap space in order to sign Shaq, which fans were upset about because he was beloved. And it was a big risk because what if we didn't get Shaq? What if Shaq decided to stay in Orlando and their favorable tax laws there? But he maneuvers a trade with Charlotte so that he could get a player that he had his eye on, Kobe Bryant. And the news was all about Shaq. Shaq was the star. But here's a young kid. To get, I think he was the number 8 draft pick. Kobe was, and because the Lakers, because you're winning, you don't get a top 10 very often. So here was a kid that we could develop. So now it's 96, 97, 98, and we're not winning. And my dad, okay, we're great because we have Shaq, but like he wanted to win championships. And so enter Phil Jackson, because now Phil had sat out the 98-99 year, which was a semi-lockout year. I think this schedule ended up being about 50 games, and the Spurs won the championship. Phil sat out that year, and my dad made the decision that he wanted Phil Jackson as the coach. And when he told me that he was going to pursue Phil, I begged him not to. And only because I felt that Shaq was the star. You had Kobe, winning the slam dunk contest as a rookie and, coming into his own. Why would you want to bring in another big personality? Like, wouldn't it be better to have a coach that would, be low key and let the stars be the stars? But my dad said, he goes, I have to win a championship with this team. And when he met with Phil, and signed Phil to a 5-year deal, you can literally see me at the press conference. There's some footage of me. I'm literally rolling my eyes at the conference. Like, who does this guy think he is? But, my dad tells a story about how he sat down with Phil and he said, look, I'm going to sign you for 5 years and I expect a championship out of this. And Phil's response was, well, why wouldn't you want 5? And it took my dad so off guard. But, that was my dad. Obviously, again, his intuition was spot on. And Phil was exactly the right coach that,
Yep.
Get them to where they wanted to go.
Right when Phil answered that question, your dad probably thought to himself, I'm definitely hiring the right man. Right?
He paid him a lot of money. Lot of money and, and gave him, and again, like I was just rolling my eyes. I didn't meet Phil until probably about 3 months later. And as soon as I met him, his voice, there was something about him that just really blew me away. And, I had to quickly find out, is he married? What is his situation? And, certainly it led to, one of the most important relationships of my life, and but anyway, it was nice to get back to winning.
That's it's family and business, right? When you talk about family and business, it's always an interesting topic because in one hand, when you can work with your family and it works, it's really nothing more special than that. But there's also so many stories and kind of things to avoid and people telling you that it can never go right. You seem to have, you lived within these dynamics, right? You have siblings that were positioned with you to be a part of the organization. Your father ran the company. You have this very close relationship with the coach. But it seems like you are able to flawlessly, and you have such a mild manner. And I mean, at least I can see that on this pod. Maybe your friend Linda, who's there, can say that you're not always that mild. But it seems like it needed that type of personality for someone like you to be able to maybe not have these highs and lows, to kind of be in the moment. And when you really unravel it, it's nothing but a stereotype. Like, you can have a healthy relationship within an organization. You can work with your siblings or your father. Was it something that, your father, let's just say your relationship with Phil, did he get it? Did he understand right away, like, this is what happens when you're all close within something and you're all wanting something, you're all in the fire together? I mean, that's very normal.
When there was that spark between Phil and I, he asked me to go to dinner with him. And I thought to myself, like, would I have dinner with Pat Riley? Would I have dinner with Del Harris? Yeah, yeah, that would be normal. A person in my position, I would, know the coach.
Maybe lunch with Del, dinner with Pat.
Well, it quickly, we knew that there was something between us. Excuse me. And I said, Phil, I would like to pursue this, but like, I am not going to have an affair with you. I'm not going to do this behind closed doors. If this is something that we're going to do, then it has to come with full disclosure. I have to be able to tell my father and to tell the key people in the organization. Otherwise, we will be compromised, and I won't do anything to hurt the team. And so when I had to sit down with my dad to let him know that that Phil and I were starting this relationship, it's like a couple weeks in, and, my dad, and this is so exactly who my dad was, I explained to him what was happening, and he didn't miss a beat. And he said, I've always thought you should date someone older than you, because someone older than you would appreciate who you are. And, right then he gave me the validation, the approval, and, and because, it wasn't, a secret, it didn't disrupt the organization, that people knew, everything was out front. And I think that's how most companies now are. They don't discourage workplace relationships, but they want full disclosure so that there isn't, harassment or
drama,
power plays going on. Right.
Your dad sounds like he's just the most fabulous man, and it feels like he probably already knew, not about Phil, but just knew. Like, when you were someone that reads people so well, he knew who you should be with. He knew what was going to be right for you. I guarantee you, when you left that meeting, though, he was like, "Get Phil Jackson on the goddamn." He's fired.
He did. They had moments, and they're very different people, both intellectuals, but Phil really wasn't comfortable with the disco, pool playing, late night life like that, and that was kind of who my dad was. So while they were both really smart readers and intellectuals, there was some things that they didn't see eye to eye on. So
yeah.
My dad did fire Phil once, and Phil did come back the second time. So it wasn't always perfect.
Yeah. Well, you can't be Dr. Jerry Buss and then have a perfect relationship with someone called the Zen Master. That's obviously bound to have some issues every once in a while. To have that nickname, by the way, is incredible. Zen Master. It's just another level.
Yeah. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's like when, and I appreciate you saying that I'm this calm person. And, growing up with my dad, he was a very an emotional loser, right? And so when I started this relationship with Phil and got, as time went on, I thought Phil would be the same way, like an emotional loser. so that when, when we would drive home after a loss, I mean, luckily that first year, he won a championship. So there wasn't a lot of losing. But when there was a game that we lost that we should have won, I would sit in the car on the drive home and just I wouldn't say a word. And, Phil was like, look, I'm fine. The wins and losses happen on the court. We don't bring them home. That, and that calm demeanor showed me another side to, the perspective of winning and losing, and that it isn't all just by whatever your last game was. This is a journey, and you got to see the bigger picture, and you have to see how those losses help build you towards that end. And so that's why he was such an instrumental person for me. So I get a little bit of my calmness that you so nicely complimented me on. That is
from the Zen master.
Right.
It's, I think it's always so cool is that for all of he's so smart. He's got such strong position on so many issues. He's well read. The books he recommends to people are not what you would expect. But at the end of the day, what I always thought that was so cool about him was he was a coach. Like, he had all of this, but he was a coach. And that's what I always thought got lost somehow, was he's an amazing teacher and coach. And I would imagine that you guys had a lot of confidence in him, or you did, during the Kobe and Shaq kind of, dissension, whether it was media, real life, combo of both. Was it hands off for you guys as a family? Let's let coach kind of deal with this. Or did your dad and you feel like you had to kind of get in the middle of that a bit?
It was Phil's job to deal with. And, certainly Shaq and Kobe are, two very different styles of how they approach the game. And, Shaq was just such a physical, his physicality made him dominate. And Kobe was kind of the opposite. Kobe had to work super hard to achieve what he wanted to achieve. So the work ethic was just different between the two. And, but I remember when Phil first started his job, and, Kobe's 20 years old or 21 years old, he said, Jeanie, there's going to be a day where Kobe is going to, stand up to me and challenge me as authority, because he's a young man. And as he matures, that is part of the process, is to challenge authority. And, it was pretty much what happened. And, Phil, in basketball wise, when my dad, sat down with Phil at the end of that first 5-year contract, my dad told Phil he was going to trade Shaq. And Phil said, you can't trade Shaq. Like, he's the most dominant player in the league. And my dad said, well, it won't matter to you because you're not coming back as So basically, what difference does it make to you? I'm putting together the team that I want. And my dad saw in Kobe a return to Showtime, a return to that flashy, thrilling type of basketball that he wanted. And my dad went all in on Kobe.
And those two championships, there was something about those two teams. I mean, I actually, I really loved those teams. I always rooted exceptionally hard for Kobe. Wasn't always the biggest Shaq fan, but no one doesn't love Shaq. I do love Shaq. It's kind of goes without saying. But those two teams felt like this, we rallied. Powell is lovable, Lamar Odom lovable, Ron Artest, New York guy, I loved that. And then Kobe at that point it struck a universal chord now. Something changed and everybody absolutely connected and adored him and loved him and grew up with him and felt those two championships, it felt like. Did you feel that way too?
Yeah, I mean, if people ask me what the most satisfying, all these eras, that to me was the most satisfying. Phil coming back after being gone for a year, and trying to, you know, build another team. It's there's not too many superstars like Kobe who went through a rebuilding era to win on the other side.
Yeah.
With one organization. And, there was a lot of challenges, and, my brother was beginning to show his influence on the basketball side. And, some of the talent that would come in maybe wasn't up to what the Laker standard would be or what Phil would want in players. And thankfully, the trade for Pau Gasol really turned things around in order. He was the piece that we needed, and he fit so elegantly into the triangle offense. And I know, like, the triangle offense, has gotten a bad rap over the last few years, but it's the triangle adapts to whatever the talent that you have. So if you have the talent that can play a fast-paced game, that's what the triangle will do. But the talent that Phil was trying to make work, he had to slow down the game. And I think that was difficult for my dad. He wanted high scoring and fast pace. And certainly as the game has evolved because of analytics and realizing the importance of a 3-point shot, now players are really good 3-point shooters. Before, the 3-point line to us back in the 80s was like, well, you always have a chance to win that game at the end if you hurl a shot and maybe get lucky and you make it. Now to think that the 3-point shot is part of the strategy. It's
Yeah.
just the game continues to evolve, right?
Yeah, and that your center is shooting threes, right? Like, could you imagine if, like, swung out to KAREEM from three? Would never have happened. When your father passed, and I hate to, I don't want to get personal, but for you, was there something with the Lakers for a second where you maybe questioned if you could do it because this was your guy's thing, and as opposed to something you ever imagined doing without him?
Yeah, I mean, his vision, the way he set it up was that my brother would run the basketball side and I would run the business side. And, I expressed my concerns to my dad because my brother and I didn't really see eye to eye on a lot of things. But those were my father's wishes. And so we tried to make it work. And, my brother could probably explain better what he was trying to accomplish in putting together the teams the way he did. But, we got away from Laker basketball, which was we went year after year after year not making the playoffs. And, I could just hear my dad's voice telling me, you have to stay competitive. You got to be part of the conversation. And it's okay. You might not win every year, but we became irrelevant and we couldn't attract free agents to our team because a free agent, rightfully so, the players have earned their free agency. They want to go where they're going to succeed. And there was no clear cut path to what we were doing. And watching the way my brother ran the team, he was changing coaches every 18 months. Well, we had great coaches. Mike Brown is a great coach, but he's a defensive minded coach. And to pivot from him to Mike D'Antoni, who's a very offensive minded coach, your roster can't shoot enough. We're under, such rules that you can change coaches, but like the players that you have worked under this system. So we were all over the map. And, Phil had left to take a job in New York. He wasn't done with basketball. And literally the NBA made us sign a agreement that he and I would not talk about basketball. So, that was devastating to our relationship. We grew apart. And, one of the things that Phil said to me was, when, I can't help you if you have these issues with your basketball team. You can't ask me advice. He goes, but you always have Kobe. You've always got Kobe. And, as time went on and we had a good business year, when Kobe announced his retirement, and, that was, I get emotional, but, Kobe asked to meet with me it's the end of 2015. And, I had never had a meeting alone with Kobe. I wasn't in charge of basketball. I knew Kobe, but this was the first time he'd asked to meet with me alone. And he said, he told me that he wanted to retire. He told me how he wanted to do it and make the announcement. And he was very specific. He had a plan and a vision of what he wanted to do, but it had to be kept quiet because he wanted it to be on his terms. And the fact that he trusted me, because he knew I could accomplish that for him, that he would be able to make the announcement, and what he wanted to do is he wanted it to be just like any ordinary game. It was a game on a Sunday against Indiana Pacers, and he wanted everyone in the arena that night to receive this letter announcing his retirement. That's when it would take place. That's when there would be no leaks to the media. And, at that time, then I knew Kobe trusted me and he believed in me. And what a gift he gave us as an organization, that we had this whole season to celebrate him. So every arena that we went to sold out, even though we were not going to make the playoffs. Our team was terrible. And, I think it even surprised him, the outpouring of love that he was given around the league, even in Boston. Yeah. And, what a great celebration we had. And as opposed to him waiting till the end of the season and then saying, I'm not coming back, we wouldn't have had that opportunity. So I think I probably cited.
No, but I know what you mean. And I will say that, that kind of send off is reserved for a few people in rare air. And when done right, it was perfect. I remember as a kid, KAREEM's kind of like tour around. They gave him a rocking chair at the Garden. I remember this as a kid. So it must have, like you said, been a pretty important year for the organization. Bittersweet in that Kobe was retiring. I will say, and you don't again have to say this, that's like my precursor to some of these things. Your dad probably didn't get that one right as it related to your brother. And that's where family and business, like we said earlier, where it can be a blessing, can also at times be a detriment. And, I think that you obviously had to deal with unprecedented kind of maneuvering and decision making. And, I think that side of you, the businesswoman, being able to navigate up this kind of enterprise to where you are now is hard. It's so hard because of the way other people look at you, the way other people want to compete with you, the fact that there wasn't a woman owning an NBA team at the time. There's so many things, and you're in LA, and you really have done it, like I said before, like with class through and through. And I have a lot of respect for how you handled that situation, because it could have been so loud and it could have been so kind of just reflective on, people could have made this into some like dynasty type thing, like the siblings at odds. And it was handled well, and you made it work, and you turned to Rob and to Magic that came on. And obviously, there's that kind of Magic, impact again. But you, at that point, it felt like we're in charge, like as if you weren't already. Now everyone knew you were in charge. And what that meant was not that you were like kicking and screaming. but that you were now going to do what you felt like was right for this organization, what you feel like your dad would have done. And unfortunately, there was going to be tough decisions along the way. But now, you know, that's what you were used to. You've had loss and you've had these things around you. And when you get a bit more numb to it, it's easier at times to make those kind of tough decisions. Are you happy looking back on it or happy or okay with how you kind of got through the situation with your brother and with Mitch? And I know Luke Walton. I mean, there was a lot of family. There's so much family within the Lakers into this new era.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and to go back to your, you know, what you said about my dad not getting it right. He actually did get it right, because what he did was he left me in charge. And he said, Jeanie, you will have the hammer if you ever need to use it. I hope you don't need to use it, but I expect you to if needed. And I like to say, you know, my dad had his children, but the Lakers were the baby. And my dad put the baby in my arms to take care of. And you know that you don't ever cross a mother, because she's going to protect her child. And he knew, you know, he wanted my brother to be successful in basketball, but you know, he just didn't see. I think my brother wanted to do things on his way, as opposed to just doing the way he was taught by my dad. And so, you know, as things are falling apart, like I said, we can't attract a free agent. You know, we had a family meeting, and I said to my brother, you know, you need to tell me when we're going to be back in the playoffs, because as on the business side, I have to be able to forecast 12 months, 24 months, 36 months out. I said, just tell me when I can expect to be back in the playoffs. And he said, you know, first he said a year. No, it'll be 3 years. So, you know, we shook on it. I said, if you're not successful in 3 years, then you know I'm going to have to make a change. And he said, absolutely, I'd step down if we're not back. And what he did was then he turned around and spoke to the media about it. And he gave his timeline to the media. So now the media is now we're all on this countdown of, you know, we should be back in the playoffs within the 3 years. And I really honestly thought, he must know what he's doing. He'll be able to do it. Why else would you say that? But then as things were going on, and now I don't have Phil to, you know, kind of bounce things off of, and I'm watching what's happening. And you know, when you're selling the Lakers, you're selling the success and the winning and the commitment to excellence. But it seemed like we were doing the opposite. We were trying to be at the bottom. We were trying to amass draft picks, which, you know, I don't really understand that strategy. My dad never used it and was very successful. So I didn't understand it. Free agents didn't want to come to a place that was clearly burning things to the ground. And, you know, finally, you know, Magic Johnson came to me and he said, I just have to talk to you about this, because he goes, the Lakers losing affects my life. He goes, you know, even though he wasn't part of the organization, he'd say, I'm walking down the street in New York and people are yelling at me like, what's wrong with your Lakers? Like, what are you going to do about it, Magic? Come on, you're the Lakers. Why is this happening? And I said, well, tell me what you see. And we had this conversation in January of 2017. And everything he said, I was like, that's what I think too. Like, it's like we were speaking the same language because we were taught by the same person. And so, you know, as you know, February approached and the trading deadline, I was worried that my brother was going to make trades that would put us further down and would take even longer to recover from. So I had to swiftly make a decision, and Magic agreed to come back and head our basketball operations. And I had a meeting with Kobe and told him what I was thinking of doing. And Kobe spent 2 hours going through a strategy for me. Like, these are the things you got to think of 5 steps ahead, Jeanie. This is what's going to happen. This is what's going to come at you. You need to be prepared. He was like, Kobe was such a strategic thinker. And, I walked away from that, knowing I'm going in the right direction. So everything had to be done. We had a timeline that day so that we could do it as quickly as possible and let our fans and stakeholders and shareholders and players, coaches know I was now in charge. But my brother, took it to court, and, we clearly, the judge looked at the trust. It was very clearly spelled out, and maybe my brother didn't understand that I had the ultimate power, because my dad knew ultimately there had to be one person in charge that would be accountable, and he put the baby in my arms, and I was going to fight for it, and I was going to protect it. And Magic was the right person to come in and help me. And I don't regret that decision. The only thing I regret is that maybe I waited too long, and that fans had to suffer a lot of losses.
It's really, I really love what you said about how your father said, this is how I want it, but I'm ultimately putting you in charge. Because that's truly what delegating is. He can tell you what he wants to see in the future, but more importantly, wanted to make sure that you knew, though, that you had to make the decisions, though, if you needed to quickly pivot. And, I guess in that way, your dad then still never got it wrong. So I take that back.
Right. Thank
Pops
you.
still got it right. So before I let you go, obviously the last few years, the biggest tragedy of all, and then the world coming to a stop, LeBron coming in, which, is in some ways some divine intervention, because only someone with like the shoulders and the mental strength to be able to carry what was needed at that time. Like, he was new to the party, but he ultimately had to all of a sudden become a leader for so many of you. And he obviously always rises to that occasion. The last few years, the bubble, AD, now Russell, Rob Pelinka, who I think, has done an incredible job. Do you feel this, not renewed excitement, but this feeling that like now this is your team and you're going to write this next chapter, and you've been a part of all these chapters, but that the next 20 years will be Jeanie Buss's Lakers?
I always look at things like, the Lakers are bigger than any one player or any one coach or any one governor. So really what, energizes me is that, my dad's, quest was to, make the Lakers the most winningest team in the NBA. And to think that we are now tied with the Boston Celtics in terms of number of championships, and that we have a chance to win number 18. That's what, my dad even said in conversations, you're going to have to do things your way, Jeanie. The game is going to continue to evolve. The business is going to evolve. We've got, patches on our jerseys now. We're selling sponsorships on our jerseys. You wouldn't have ever thought that would happen under the David Stern era, and so I like to just think I'm continuing to move things along, and the next person that sits in the seat that I do, I hope they continue the legacy, the formula that Dr. Buss, created, which was always pursue winning, always be competitive, always be part of the conversation. And, I'm doing it under the new rules of the CBA and how things work. And, that's, I don't need to write the Jeanie Buss chapter. I'm just continuing what my dad built.
Totally. That's amazing. I knew you were going to say that. Because you are, what I think also goes understated is you're running a $5 billion business. I mean, it's insanely impressive. Kudos to you for that, because there's, the product on the court is the driver, but you still have to operate a $5 billion business. And, it's really incredible, and you've done an incredible job. And I think that like sports fans have a great deal of respect for you. I know people within the NBA do. I want to make a shout out, and I'm going on a limb here, but I bet your mom was an amazing person.
My mom, that's where I get my sweetness from. Like, my mom was the sweetest person, and her laugh, I have her laugh. And so, yeah, I was very blessed with two great parents.
Well, thank you very much. Can we call each other friends now? We're kind of like friends. I feel like
I know. When am I going to run into you? When will our paths cross?
Well, they'll definitely cross in the Staples Center when I'm there. But when I'm in LA next, why don't we just cross them? We'll have another 6:30 dinner like Magic and I had.
I like early dinners too, so I'm in.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Good luck this year, until at least when you see the Brooklyn Nets. But aside from that, good luck to you. And say hi to Linda. I feel like I would love Linda. I don't know why. I just saw her for 1 second.
You will meet her too.
All right. Awesome. I will speak to you soon, and congrats on your success, and just congrats on living your life the way you have. I mean, I love meeting people that I think just do things at the highest level and with class, and you've done that over and over again.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way you understood like who my dad was, and having this conversation. Not too many people get it, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll speak to you soon.